Canadian Coffeehouse Crime. My name is Catherine, and today our case takes us to Montreal, Quebec, Canada's second biggest city and largest French-speaking city, with a population of 1.7 million. It is in the eastern side of Canada, situated between Quebec City and Ottawa. McGill University offers degree programs in education, engineering, and law, and it's considered to be the Harvard of Canada. Montreal Canadiens is the oldest ice hockey franchise in the world, started in 1909 and has won 24 Stanley Cups. The Montreal Expos spent 36 years in Montreal before becoming the Washington Nationals. Montreal is also home to Cirque du Soleil, which means Circus of the Sun. The shows are amazing. Check one out when you can. On Thursday morning, September 20th, 2001, at around 10:30 a.m., homicide detectives were called to 85 Alta Vista Street in Kirkland. Kirkland is an upper-class area of southern Montreal. The home was apparently on fire and was being controlled, but the fire department called them due to the 6 deceased bodies that were located within the smoldering home. When officers showed up to the upscale suburb in Montreal's West Island's 2-story home, the officers showed up to a frenzied scene of hysterical people trying to get into the crime scene, newspaper reporters on top of rooftops trying to steal a good picture. Inside the home, authorities found the bodies of 51-year-old John Bauer, Helen, his wife, 50, his 13-year-old son, Justin, his 19-year-old son, Wesley, their 22-year-old son, Jonathan, and 44-year-old Lucio Beccarini. A family friend, seeing the news, decided to contact Helen's father. When she could not get a hold of him, she called 911. Police responded to her call and went to the home of Elmer Carroll, where they found the 74-year-old Carroll shot in the back of the head while he was getting his coat from his closet in his Notre Dame de Grâce apartment. The body count was now at 7. Autopsies of the bodies reported that each victim had a single gunshot wound at the back of their head, except for John. His was self-inflicted. All of his victims and himself were shot with the same .22 caliber gun that was stolen and was found beside John's body, where he was discovered in the kitchen. John had committed familicide. He had shot his wife, his father-in-law, and all 3 of his sons. But who was Lucio Beccarini? John was born in 1950. His father was a butcher for Canada Packers. His mother was a stern-faced 1950s homemaker. He lived under a house of very tidy and strict feudal kind of rules. He was the 3rd child out of 4, Irish, European, immigrant kind of area. He also lived next door to a soup kitchen. Daily, he would see defeated men and women and children. It changed him as a person, and this display of desperation and a person's inability to provide for themselves haunted him until his death. He attended St. Thomas Aquinas High School, where he excelled in hockey. Sometimes he found the all-boys school surroundings, the situation, uncomfortable. He would get a little insecure within his surroundings, and he would get reserved when he was uncomfortable, and this is when he started developing his own techniques of facade and hiding behind a mask. Hockey gave him the outlet of being confident, and that was able to help him be more aggressive and he was not a violent hockey player. He was a linesman, but he would be belligerent. He would let off a lot of verbal steam when he was playing hockey, and that helped him a lot with his aggression and his emotions. He was so good at hockey, although, that he ended up playing for the Junior A Quebec team, and he actually was scouted by the NHL to be a referee. He turned it down to be a teacher, to go to school and become a teacher, because he believed that the money would be more steady than refereeing. Money is just paid as a gig system when you're a referee, whereas teaching is a salaried position. John met his wife at a teacher's convention. She was smitten with him, and he lavished her with gifts and dinner and drinks and fancy car rides. John always seemed to have money, even though he worked at a sports store part-time. He always had the fanciest car, always buying the drinks. He was always buying the dinner. Unbeknownst to his friends, although yes, he did work part-time at a sports store, but he had a boss that owned a racehorse, and he would hang out with his boss at the racetracks and silver-tongue his way into knowing gamblers and owners and trainers, making skilled decisions and skilled bets, and he was making a fortune. And this turned him into a gambling addict. He never wanted to get married until he had enough money to buy a house. And when they did get married, they were married in St. Monica's Church in Montreal. After that, they had 3 boys, Justin, Jonathan, and Wesley. During the 80s, John decided that he no longer desired to be a teacher. He had gone to high school in 1965, and in the 1980s, he was done teaching after around 20 years. And his father-in-law worked at Molson, so he decided he wanted to be a beer rep. And he was actually pretty good at it. He was charismatic and was kind of manipulative, and he was good at making friends and good at talking with the right people. So a beer rep was actually kind of up his alley, and he really liked going to the sports events and the banquets and the charity dances, and he'd give out free beer here and there, saying it's just a few cases of beer, I'm sure the company can donate it. He was very well liked by the bartenders, and he was well known by restaurant owners, and he did good as a beer rep within his 10-year career. He worked for Carling O'Keefe, Molson's, and Labatt. Now, in 1996, although, he had a leg injury. I'm not sure what kind of injury and what happened to him, but he got some kind of gash on his leg, and it wouldn't heal properly. And he got infected, and he wasn't able to walk. And he got up past 300 pounds, and this was kind of devastating for him because he was kind of a professional athlete. His physique was very important to him, and this caused him depression. So his leg wouldn't heal properly unless he lost some weight. So he decided to get gastro bypass surgery, and he did lose 100 pounds, and he couldn't work for a year. And this is where things started to unravel for John. Money started to get tight because he couldn't work, and he borrowed money from friends. At the time, he was working at Labatt's in Calgary, Alberta, and apparently he had been fired for showing signs of depression, alcohol abuse, and his belligerence was bad, but he had told everybody else that he was just fed up with the company. In 1991, his mother had died from cancer, and he was fighting with his sister over the property of his mother. His sister had sold the property and split the money with him, and this upset him for some reason, and he wrote her a 5-page nasty letter and never spoke to her again. But to everyone else around him, he seemed to be so happy that everybody assumes now that he was just a very good actor. He lived in a large house with a swimming pool with 3 kids. His yearly expenditures equaled $80,000 a year, and that money wasn't coming in. Helen was doing light work at an elementary school cafeteria, criteria. And around this time, he started hitting up loan sharks. He was also still gambling, and he had debts from that. His son also started gambling around this time, and he had his own gambling debts, and it is known John paid for that debt for his son by borrowing money. 13-year-old Justin was playing hockey with Lucio's 13-year-old son, and Lucio felt sorry for John and offered him a job at a small finance company called Spar. It would finance leases for commercial equipment. He thought John would be okay at selling because of all his contacts from the beer rep. But it was commission work, and he wasn't putting in the time. He wasn't making any money. He actually tried to borrow $80,000 for a second mortgage from Spar, but it was denied for lack of a repayment plan. After that, he goes to the company and complained about back pain. Lucio, his daughter, stated later that John owed him a large sum of money. At one point, weeks before the murders, John had hired a hitman to shoot him one day so that his wife and family could get some life insurance. The hitman actually reneged on the deal, and he went to the police, and the police questioned John about it, and John had said, "Why would I want to kill myself?" But apparently it's been reported that he was telling people that his wife would be better off without him to collect the insurance. When he started making his plans, he was $200,000 in debt. He had 2 mortgages, several maxed out credit cards, phone bills, advance on commissions from Spar, private loans, gambling debts to sharks, several IOUs, $10,000 to friends, $6,300 to his father-in-law, which he told his father-in-law not to tell Helen about. At this point, most people would just claim bankruptcy, not John. Because of the soup kitchen that he grew up next to, he thoroughly believed his identity was based on his success as a provider, and he was unable to cope with the disappointment. He lacked the ability to ask for help. What he did was not an act of despair, but the outcome of a long period of despair. But why that despair made the leap to mass murder is a mystery. This was stated by John's brother. On Tuesday, September 18th, 2001, John walked into the bedroom where his wife Helen slept. With a .22 caliber weapon, he shot his wife in the back of the head. John then walked into 13-year-old Justin's room and shot him in the back of the head where he slept. He then called the elementary school where Helen was working and said that she was unwell, and then called Justin's school and told them the same thing. 19-year-old Wesley was shot in the back of his head when he came home from school that afternoon. Police believe that Jonathan may have been shot in the back of the head in his home 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning after his shift at the restaurant he worked at called Cheers. Wednesday morning, September 19, 2001, John drove to his father-in-law's apartment in Notre Dame de Grace and shot him in the back of the head while he was getting his coat out of his closet, and then called his employers and told him he had a sore throat. Wednesday afternoon, he called Lucio Baccarini and his business partner, Mr. Chaput, and asked them to come over, but they declined because they were golfing. On Thursday, September 20th, 2001, he got a hold of Baccarini with his 13-year-old son who played hockey with John's 13-year-old son, Justin. He invited them over to his house. Baccarini said sure, but fortunately he dropped his son off at school before proceeding to John's house at 8:30 in the morning. Baccarini walked into John's house, and John shot him in the back of the head in the kitchen. Then John proceeded to spread gas around the house, then set the house on fire, and then shot himself. The gas can was located next to his body. The exact day the murders were discovered, 3 letters showed up in the mailboxes. one to John's brother in Burlington, Ontario, one to Helen's brother in Montreal, and Helen's cousin in Hamilton. John explained to them that he had planned the murders for 6 months. In the letters, John described the plan of the killings and assured them none of them had felt any pain, and explained he could no longer cope with the financial pressures. Helen was worried about things and felt the children had suffered enough, and he thought that the father-in-law wouldn't be able to live without Helen and her children. John went on to explain that he thought he wanted them all together in heaven, and he took them out of their pain. Because John had moved the bodies around the house during the course of a couple of days that he had spent with their deceased bodies, plus with the fire and water damage, police have had a hard time trying to piece together the whole scenario. They relied on a lot of pathology report interviews, John's letters, to try to reconstruct the crime. They traced fax line messages and phone lines, and they used the DNA of saliva on the envelopes that were sent to the family, and they also did powder burn tests on John's hands, but there are still a lot of gaps in the story, and it took 3 years to write the police report. Apparently, the police force had handled 12 family murder-suicides that year, which is actually staggering, but apparently none of them had matched with the number of family victims or the cold-bloodedness of the murders. And I agree with them for 2 reasons. One, that he even calculated the time of mail delivery into his plans. And did he really call over a 13-year-old boy that played hockey with his son to shoot him in the back of his head in front of his own father for no reason? That's top shelf evil to me. Thank you very much for joining me at Canadian Coffee House Crime. My name is Catherine. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.